Hi, and welcome to Thursday Comics. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. So this is issue 100 of Journey into Mystery, and this will be the final issue of Thor that doesn't feature the main story by Jack Kirby. It's written by Stan Lee, illustrated by Don Heck, and lettered by S. Rosen. And next issue, all Kirby all the time until Kirby leaves. Well, actually, until shortly before Kirby leaves Marvel, because I think there's a John Buscema issue of Thor, a couple issues before Kirby leaves. I think because they swapped assignments. Jack Kirby drew the final issue of Silver Surfer while John Buscema drew an issue of Thor. So on the cover, you will never forget Thor's showdown with Mr. Hyde. Also, the boyhood of Thor featured in Tales of Asgard. And so we have a Jack Kirby drawn cover and, him squaring off with Mr. Hyde, which is no surprise because this is part 2 of a two-parter. The fact that it's taking place on a nuclear sub adds a new wrinkle to it. So, we'll be waiting to see that sub show up in the story. The Mighty Thor, the master plan of Mr. Hyde. So everybody's angry at Thor and frightened of him, and Thor's not sure why. The police shoot at him, and he flies away. I'll fly to another part of the city where I'll be safe from their bullets. Now, I think in previous issues we've seen that bullets don't really bother Thor. I don't know that his skin is impervious to bullets, but he can pretty reliably swat them away with his hammer. And we have sort of these short sleeve cops, sort of their summer uniforms, which I don't recall ever seeing in a Kirby comic. In a Kirby comic, the cops are usually in long sleeve gear. Thor says, "They call me a criminal, say I've robbed a bank. This is insane." And so we get a flashback to the previous issue and all the little subplots that are going on, including Thor asking Odin to consider his request to marry Jane Foster. And they go out on a big date at the Ritz Terrace, which I'm guessing is a real place, probably someplace, Stan, takes his wife on a date. Mr. Hyde overhears it, and so he's going to make sure he ruins that date. And we have a nice little sequence here at the restaurant. And then I like this, the waiter comes over. "I'll take your order now, sir." And then Don Blake turns around. "You, Don, what is it?" And it turns out the waiter is Mr. Hyde, holding them at gunpoint, kidnaps them, takes them away, sets up a time bomb and leaves Don Blake with the time bomb, and then takes Jane Foster away. He's going to steal a submarine. I'm not sure exactly how that all ties in with this, except that, Jack Kirby drew a nuclear submarine on the cover, so we got to work it into the story now. Don Blake, he's tied up, but he touches his cane. He's able to tap it, turn into Thor, and get away. Now, one thing I want to note in this issue, in the previous issue, everybody was scared of Thor, somehow word had gotten out that Thor was robbing banks. And then, Thor talks about it must have been Mr. Hyde, but we never see, because Mr. Hyde is so strong, but Mr. Hyde looks very different from Thor, so I would have liked to have seen some kind of scene or description or illustration of exactly how Mr. Hyde was able to pin all this stuff on Thor. Did he put on a Thor costume and do it? And he was just convincing enough in this Thor costume, even though they look very different. Did he make a Thor puppet, a Thor robot? It seems like that plot thread, which was sort of a hard left turn, kind of came out of nowhere in the previous issue, doesn't really get resolved in any interesting way here. Points off for that. So we get, a nice little fight. Mr. Hyde rips off a piece of the submarine, throws it at Thor. I miss Kirby. His Thor issues are always great. But, Don Heck's been doing a good job. He's been doing the best job of all the replacements, and having Stan do the writing and with Don Heck on board, it's a Marvel comic. It's not the best, it reads like a Marvel comic, and it's got little twists in it. It's not, like a Brand Ech comics. He's fighting with Mr. Hyde. And so here's a nice wrinkle, an interesting wrinkle. Jane Foster doesn't know that Thor and Don Blake are the same person, so she thinks Don Blake is still tied up next to that time bomb. And she knows that if anything happens to Mr. Hyde, he's not going to be able to stop that time bomb from going off, and Don Blake's going to die. So she tries to thwart Thor. She hides his hammer so he won't be able to find it. Now Mr. Hyde's holding Thor at gunpoint, and he knows that if he doesn't touch his hammer before 60 seconds run out, he's going to turn back into Don Blake and be defenseless. So he creates a storm within the submarine just before his powers go away, and that storm gives him enough cover that nobody sees him change form. And then he crawls around in the confusion looking for his walking stick, finds it. Now he's Thor again, chases Mr. Hyde, but Jane stops him again and says, "You have your hammer again. Oh no, you must let Hyde escape. If you don't, Don Blake will die. Jane, don't stand aside." And so Mr. Hyde gets away. Some of the police witnessing this say, "Look, it's Hyde. He's escaping. Impossible. Thor would never let him go. You don't think he beat Thor, do you?" "No, I didn't beat Thor this time, but next time we meet, it will be a different story." So that's another thing, like having people, sort of rooting for Thor and wondering, oh, did he get, maybe he's not as tough as we think he is. Maybe he's not as great a hero as we think he is. That in this scene, it's the police, but sometimes it's like kids, or just bystanders getting caught up in the story the way the readers of these comics would have at the time of, who's tougher, Mr. Hyde or Thor? So he tells her, "Hey, first order of business, I'm going to go save Don Blake. Don't worry. You have the word of Thor. He's going to be okay." And so he flies away. But how does Thor know where Hyde's castle is, or even that Don is in the castle? I'm afraid that Thor will always be an enigma to me. If we were in more of like the Superman phase of Thor, she'd probably start suspecting, his dual identity here, like Lois Lane. But we're past that phase. Thor's becoming its own thing. It's becoming more of a Marvel comic, less of a DC comic. And so, she's just, puzzling at the enigma that is Thor. But a nice little capper to the story is Odin appears before Thor. "You dared ask me to make that female an immortal? Odin, wait, hear me out. Silence. I saw her thwart your efforts to capture an evildoer. Petition denied. She is not worthy. But noble father," too late, he's gone. "Again, I have lost the one I love most in all the universe. Again, my victory has a hollow ring. But I shall never despair. If mortal man can find happiness, someday the god of thunder shall find it too." So ends the non-Kirby saga of Thor. Next issue, it's Jack Kirby. And next issue is not going to be the return of Mr. Hyde. It's going to be Zarko the Tomorrow Man. But when we do see Mr. Hyde again, he'll be teaming up with the Human Cobra, and they become sort of a deadly duo. And now we get to the Kirby portion of this issue, Tales of Asgard, home of the mighty Norse gods, the boyhood of Thor, the Storm Giants. And I'm going to switch out this collection for the Tales of Asgard collection. Tales of Asgard, the boyhood of Thor, the Storm Giants, written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Paul Reinman, lettered by Art Simic. And of course, a comic that's drawn by Kirby is co-written by Kirby. And I have a little note that I wrote here. It says Wonder Twins Jungle. So I guess when I was working on Superpowers and working on the Wonder Twins, I sort of, saw this page and thought, maybe I could steal this composition and instead of Thor and Loki, have the Wonder Twins going into some kind of adventure, in the jungles of Exor. "Look, Loki, there are the two sons of the Storm Giant. They have stolen the golden apples of the goddess Iduna. It is our duty to return them to their rightful owner. Do not speak to me of duty, Thor. I do what I will." As a youth, from the day he was strong enough to wield a sword, Thor had dreamed of one day inheriting the enchanted battle hammer of Odin. But Odin's hammer could only be won by accomplishing deeds of valor, deeds such as the one you are about to see. So the previous stories in Tales of Asgard were these kind of mystical epics, deep mythology kind of stuff, world building, the origins of Earth, the origins of the gods, the origins of humanities. And now we're getting into a phase where it becomes more sort of standard comics, and it becomes the adventures of Thor as a boy. Talk about Superman, kind of mirroring, the adventures of Superboy. You sort of have Superman, and let's show Superman's adventures as a boy. Let's show Thor's adventures as a boy. Although, of course, these Thor adventures kind of fit into the continuity in a much more interesting way. And even though I miss the sword and sorcery epics of young Odin and the larger than life mythology that he lives, these sort of more standard comic book adventures of Thor and Loki are a lot of fun too. We get to see the origin of Thor gaining the hammer, and that becomes the through line for these adventures. And we get to see a period where he and Loki are brothers and companions and friends after a sort. Loki is still kind of scheming and doesn't like his brother and distrustful. And some of that, I wonder how much is Kirby and how much is Stan Lee. I think both of them want to sort of plant the seeds of Loki becoming the villain, but it's just a matter of how, to what degree. And I don't know for sure. I mean, maybe looking at some of the original art for this, I could look at, Kirby's margin notes compared to Stan's finished script. But I get the feeling like that they're supposed to largely be friends, but with Loki occasionally having resentment and sabotaging Thor, but not to the relentless degree that you see in this story. So again, just beautiful adventure stuff. The Hall of the Giants, and they're eating their food, cutting their massive meat that they're eating, and it just feels like a dangerous situation, and it feels like a lot of fun, like a Ray Harryhausen movie. Here's the first. So they're there to get the apples, and in the mythology, the apples of Iduna are what give the gods their immortality. As long as they keep eating a steady diet of these golden apples, they'll live forever. But if they stop eating those apples, they will die. And so these two, are trying to get them back. And Loki pushes Thor into the fray. If you're so anxious to be a hero, Thor, I'll give you the chance. This is the time to attack while their thoughts are on their food. You fool, they'll see me. Or perhaps Loki is not such a fool. Perhaps that was his intention. What have we here? So yeah, in this scene, it's very clearly like a villainous act on Loki's behalf, or at least Thor is suspecting that. But I think that, and maybe, maybe Kirby and Stan are in complete agreement on that. Maybe they're both in agreement on that, or maybe, but to me, I think this comic and this scene would work better if, they're mostly friends, but we see the seeds of resentment being planted, as opposed to Loki just being like pure evil from day one, like the Omen or something, that he's mischievous. He has a jealousy of his brother Thor, but Thor does want to be the hero. So he's kind of, it's subtle, like he's pushing him into battle, but I don't know that he necessarily thought it all the way through and wanted Thor to get captured by the giants. I think he was, being a little bit of an asshole, not like a huge mustache twirling supervillain. And so Thor announces his intentions. It is a puny one from the land of Asgard. Let us slay him as a warning to others not to enter our domain. Hold your tongue, insolent one. You speak to Thor, son of Odin. I am here to return the golden apples of Iduna. Now, I thought, his sort of bravery there, just from reading, I would think that maybe they'd be impressed by his, royal, his regal nature, the fact, his bravery, the fact that he's not afraid of these guys and standing up to them, that they might respect that for like a second, before they try to kill him. But that beat isn't here. They just go straight to, get him, drown that young fool in a torrent of broth. And so now the action starts, and it's great. Little tiny Thor cuts the leg out from under the table. This guy gets a face full of the hot broth he was going to dump on Thor. Thor knocks a pepper shaker into his face. They get pepper in their faces and they're sneezing, but the sneeze is blowing Thor around. It does make me wonder how recent is the invention of the pepper shaker. But regardless, it's a fun idea. Suspension of disbelief. We're talking about giants and stuff here, so why not? So again, great perspective, great way of communicating the immense size in kind of a size restricted format of comics. So now they got Thor, and Loki starts a smoky fire with wet leaves to create a smoky diversion. Now here I thought, yeah, because they're on this adventure together. They're brothers. Maybe they don't always get along. Maybe Loki's jealous, but they're still brothers and they're on a mission, so he's helping them out. And in the smoke, he bonks the giant on the nose and gets away. But then Loki goes out of his way to say, "No, I'm an asshole." "That was quick thinking, Loki. Now quickly, we must find the golden apples and flee." "Bah, I did not do it to save you, merely to create a diversion for me, for I know where the apples are hidden." See, I don't think we needed that. I think it would be more interesting to see an arc for Loki, to see, his resentment grow into a full-fledged hatred, rather than have it just be full-fledged hatred from day one, have him be a total stinker from day one. But that's just me. Again, maybe that was... Because I'm not seeing anything in the art that necessarily communicates that. In the art, he could very easily be saying, "Come on, Thor, over here," But maybe Kirby agrees with my assessment of the story, or maybe he and Stan are in complete agreement about what this finished product is. And so now they get the apples. They're on the back of this imprisoned giant eagle. "See, they are here atop Agnar, king of the eagles, the eternal prisoner of the storm giants. But I shall escape on his back now and leave you behind to save yourself from the storm giants as best you can. No, you shall not leave without me." Again, your mileage may vary, but to me, it doesn't need to be like that. And the way this reads, it could read just as easily as okay, we're getting ready to go, and then, Thor cuts the cord and they're able to fly away together. And then when he lifts, Odin gets a chance. It's almost like a carnival game or something. He gets to try to lift Odin's hammer to see if he's worthy. And "After each deed of valor, my son Thor, you are able to lift my hammer a little higher until finally someday he'll be able to lift it all the way and he'll be worthy and it'll be his hammer." And Loki says, "Bah, I hoped that I would receive credit for this deed, but Odin is too wise to be deceived." See, I think that, a more interesting dramatic progression would be that Loki's not so much of a stinker during this adventure, maybe a little bit of a stinker here and there, but not just out and out evil and saying "bah" all the time. And then when the adventure's done, and instead of the two of them sharing credit equally, instead, Thor kind of gets the attention, gets to lift the hammer, then he sort of simmers in the background, and the bitterness starts to fester that eventually, as he becomes an adult, he becomes a full-on villain. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee made these comics, faster than it took me to read it, probably. So, I have the benefit of hindsight, and that's just my assessment of it. But again, a great story, just really well paced, exciting, well drawn, interesting developments. I do miss the sort of Prince Valiant, mythic tableau of the first couple issues of Tales of Asgard. But I feel like this is, this is the way forward. This is probably more commercial, even though it's not quite as much to my taste as the previous ones. It's a winning formula, and I'm still enjoying the hell out of it. So, let's keep them coming. So thanks for joining me. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design, and I'll see you next Thursday.